If you ask any comic book lover who is their favorite superhero, then you probably hear a list of big names like Superman, Spider-Man, Hulk, Iron Man, etc. Don't get me wrong, I also like these big superhero names, but one of my favorite ones was always the Russian mutant Colossus. Do you think that it's maybe the right time for his solo movie? Well, stay with us and find out. But first, let's remember who is Piotr Nikolayevich Rasputin, known as Colossus. He was born on a Soviet farm and raised by poor Soviet farmers near Lake Baikal in Siberia. We first heard about him in the comic book from 1975 called Giant Size X-Men. Peter manifested his superhuman powers during his adolescence while saving his sister from a runaway tractor. After this, he was contracted by the founder of the X-Men, Professor Charles Xavier. Even though Peter wanted nothing more than to take care of his family and sister by plowing the fields. After meeting the bald-headed man in a wheelchair, he became a new dominant member of the X-Men. Colossus is maybe one of the most underappreciated X-Men members. He is possibly the most humble and soft-sided character in Marvel's repertoire, which, considering his superpowers, is ironic. You already know that he can turn his skin into a nearly indestructible metallic alloy, right? But although he disposes of superpowers like this, Colossus only reluctantly agrees to use them in combat because he feels responsible to use his abilities for the betterment of human and mutant kind. The Metal Man is portrayed as a very quiet, honest, and virtuous character. He will rather paint or draw instead of using his powers all that much. There's no doubt that he is the biggest and strongest member of the X-Men mutant family, but with one word, he has a heart made of gold. In the comic books, Colossus has an almost consistent presence. Also, he appeared in numerous movies, graphic novels, television shows, cartoons, and even video games. Just like Wolverine, he gets a lot of attention and he appears in almost every product of the X-Men franchise. But how did he get his powers? Well, he has always had them, even as a baby. But the first time he transformed his body into metal was when a tractor was coming to hit his sister. Peter stepped into the path of the tractor and smashed it aside like a toy. Colossus's metal skin is impenetrable by extreme heat, extreme cold, bullets, explosions, and almost anything that you can imagine. But it also has some weaknesses. Not even Wolverine's claws were able to do more than scratch. But as I said, he has his weaknesses. The Metal Man may be resistant to both extreme heat and extreme cold. And he will hit that like button just like you should if you haven't done so already. No, really. Colossus may be resistant to heat and cold, but a combination of these two can be catastrophic for him. This art lover superhero has a lot of history behind him, and we can talk maybe for hours to describe all of his characteristics and interesting facts that connect to his life. But you may or may not know that he once survived a nuclear bomb, or that he has a son, and Magneto once saved his life. However, the greatest thing that speaks of his uniqueness is that Colossus has never been afraid to sacrifice himself to save the world. Once there was a virus called the Legacy, and it was spread to kill all the mutants. The X-Men's #1 scientist, the Beast, has found a cure for it. But there was one problem. To save the others, the cure had to kill the first person who would inject it into his body. This is where Colossus steps up, and rather than waits for a safer version of the cure, he volunteers and injected the cure into himself. He died, and his body was cremated. Well, you probably won't see him as an ordinary superhero after hearing all of this. Colossus proved that just because you are a big guy, you don't have to be a raging meathead. You could be so much more. So, do you think that this guy deserves a solo movie in the Marvel Cinematic Universe? He sure does. But can we expect something like this to happen anytime soon? The X-Men are soon to arrive in the MCU. But before they team up in a movie, Marvel should introduce several individual heroes in solo films, and the Mighty Russian is one of them. In the 2000s X-Men, Colossus's cameo was portrayed by Donald McKinnon. The character also appeared in the movie X2 in 2003, X-Men The Last Stand in 2006, and X-Men Days of Future Past in 2014, where he was played by Daniel Cudmore. The last portrayal was made by Stefan Kapicic, who provided the voice of Colossus in both Deadpool movies. After Disney acquired 21st Century Fox, we were sure that the X-Men mutants would become part of the MCU. The next step was for Marvel to obtain the film rights for X-Men. And that thing also happened. Now Marvel has the rights to 13 movies made so far in the X-Men franchise. The biggest question right now is, which X-Men characters will Marvel decide to involve in future projects? They will probably go with the same recipe just like with the Avengers, a range of solo movies, establishing individual characters ahead of an inevitable X-Men team-up. We can't speak for any potential dates about when a solo movie for Colossus could be released or put in Marvel plans, but we can be sure that if Kevin Feige and Marvel decide to make X-Men solo movies, Colossus probably will be in their priorities. And who can we expect to portray the character in a potential solo film? The Serbian actor Stefan Kapičić did great by both voicing and providing performance capture for the character's face in the Deadpool movies, so he is the first one desired by the audience. As I already mentioned, the two other actors portrayed the Metal Mutant in the X-Men movies. Goodmore, who reprised the role 3 times, was also great, so we wouldn't mind if he returned to the role for the 4th time. In addition to the idea that Marvel could start planning solo movies for X-Men characters, is the statement from the studio head chief Kevin Feige, who said that he is not just interested in big-name characters like Magneto, Wolverine, and Xavier. In an interview with MTV News, Feige said that you should smash that like button just like you should if you haven't done so already. Just kidding. He said that the solution for introducing the X-Men into the MCU lies in the less-known characters. It's not just marquee names, you know? There are hundreds of names on those documents, on those agreements. The fact that Marvel is now as close as we may ever be to having access to all of those characters is something I've been dreaming about for almost 20 years at Marvel. It's very exciting, said Feige. So we can be sure that Marvel will continue to avoid repeating ideas that were developed by other studios. And this gives us a clue that Wolverine may be out for some time. Also, the first X-Men team wasn't so popular. The X-Men family actually started to gain popularity after the relaunch in 1975, when the so-called Second Genesis team joined up. Colossus was one of the new characters back then. The second team also included some female characters and characters with different nationalities. This diversity gives Marvel today a lot of potential for the future. A solo movie for Colossus could make Piotr Nikolayevich Rasputin a freedom fighter, a Russian outlaw who refuses to give up the battle. This is how Colossus could become the key player in the X-Men future in MCU. He could become the most high-profile mutant in the world, and at the same time, the most controversial one, who could be a main target for the Russian government. At this point, there are thousands of scenarios about how the story could go in the potential solo movie for Colossus. One thing is sure, fans are arching for something like this to happen in the near future. The idea for a solo movie could be also followed by a mini-series where we could find out more about Piotr's life before joining the X-Men family. I really hope that we will hear more about this idea in the coming year or two. Until then, thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.